Murdered. Written by Hey It's Kate. This is my first post to this website, and this seems like the perfect place for it. So here it goes. My first babysitting gig almost got me and the kids killed, all because of one mistake. I was 14 at the time. This happened sometime in the summer of 2014. I had known these kids and their parents almost since I was born. Our neighborhood was very friendly, and our parents regularly did stuff together. I remember this night very clearly over 2 years later, and it still terrifies me. However, if there is something that doesn't make sense, tell me in the comments, and I'll try and find out if I missed or forgot anything. The night this happened, our parents were going out to some fancy adult-only restaurant to celebrate my mom's birthday. They said they'd be home around 11, and to remember to lock the doors. They had 3 kids, Haley, Alex, and Madison. Haley was the oldest, and she was 12, almost 13. I know it seems weird that I was babysitting a kid only 2 years younger than me, but Haley wasn't the most trustworthy kid. I think she would have been much better if her friends weren't such a bad influence. Alex was the middle child and their only son, and he was usually pretty good. He liked video games a lot, and he was usually pretty quiet. Madison was the youngest. I think she was 6 at the time, and she was probably the most difficult. She wasn't very good at listening and tried to act older than her age, swearing, refusing to sleep. She even stole stuff from her school more than once. Well, our parents met up and left around 7 o'clock. I thought this was a pretty great deal, since I was pretty close with these kids. They were usually pretty good for me, except Madison and sometimes Haley. So I figured this night was just an easy $60. But, as it turns out, it was probably the most terrifying night of my life. Madison wanted to play outside as soon as her parents left. I trusted Alex enough, but Haley usually had friends over and they got into stuff they weren't supposed to. Mom's wine, Dad's cigarettes. She found a credit card when she was 8. So I told her to come out with us. She did come out, but immediately said she was going to the store and walked away. I started to chase after her, but then Madison started to wander into the road, so I just yelled she had better be back soon or I was calling her parents. I got Madison into their yard and we just played with dolls for a while. I checked in on Alex a couple times, but he was doing fine. Haley did come back eventually, but she had lied about the store. No surprise there, and instead had her friend Jess. They went inside and we played dolls for probably 10 more minutes. That's when I probably made the biggest mistake in my life, mostly because of Madison. This guy stopped his car right in their driveway. He asked if we were okay outside by ourselves. No idea why he chose us, but there was probably 20 other kids outside at the time. I said we weren't by ourselves and our parents were right, inside. But of course Madison blurted out no, they're actually at dinner. This is our helpless little 14-year-old babysitter. Might as well just kill us now, I thought. The guy smiled and told us to have a good night and be safe. Don't stay out past dark, all that shit before leaving. Nothing struck me as wrong at first. I thought it was weird he picked us out of the literally 30 other kids, but figured he was just concerned. His car looked fine. He didn't look like someone who would kill a child. I was just mad at Madison though, and reminded her of stranger danger, but she just called me a bitch and acted like nothing was wrong. It made me mad that she didn't understand what she did wrong, and also called me a bitch. So I made her come inside with me. Haley and Jess surprisingly didn't get into the wine again, and Alex was fine. So I just sat Madison down in the living room and we watched TV for a while. It was probably around 9 by now, so I told Madison it was time to get ready for bed. Of course, she threw a fit and ran into the backyard. When I went to get her, I noticed a light in the woods behind our house. But I just thought it was some kids playing in the woods. That honestly could have been what it was, but I'm convinced I was wrong and it was something much worse. I finally managed to force Madison into bed and started to read a story. Believe it or not, she was actually pretty calm when she listened to me read, so I kept that up for a while, hoping she would fall asleep. She actually did, so I went to check on Haley and Jess, who wouldn't open the door. Alex was still in the basement on his Xbox or PlayStation or whatever, so I went down and made him come up to do something else. He was pretty good sport about that and he didn't complain at all, so he started watching TV and I started to finally relax. I was doing my own thing in the other room when Alex said there was someone at the back door who said he was the pizza man. I went in to see it and it was the man. Side note, I'm not entirely sure that this guy was the same from the one earlier, but come on, who else would know we were home alone? I still didn't get this man was bad news, so I asked him why he was at the back door. He said he didn't see the front door, which was obviously a lie, but I didn't ask him. I told him to wait and went upstairs to yell at Haley for ordering pizza without my permission. She opened the door and said she didn't, before slamming it shut again. Haley lied a lot, but it was usually pretty obvious. For whatever reason, I trusted her about this. I went down to tell the guy he was at the wrong house, when Alex told me he had bolted as soon as I went up. I thought he had maybe figured he was at the wrong house and was so embarrassed or something, so I told Alex he could go down and play his game again. He was happy and ran back down into the basement right before there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole and saw that the guy was just standing there, holding no pizza box and wearing no uniform. I didn't notice this at the time, but later realized when telling my hysterical parents and the police. "Sorry, dude, you got the wrong house," I told him. I started walking back to the living room when I heard him say, "No, this is the right house. The little redhead ordered it." Looking back, I should have known right then to not let him in. How could he know Madison had red hair from a phone call? She was a weird child, but I don't think she would just randomly tell someone that. I still didn't recognize him as the guy from earlier, but I'm certain it was him. He could have changed his look, or maybe I just wasn't remembering him right. But when he said, all I was thinking about was Madison, I ran upstairs to yell at her for ordering pizza and still being up, and somehow getting the phone. But when I ran into her room, she was still sleeping. I thought she was pretending, so I woke her up and she called me a bitch again. She said she never ordered pizza and I couldn't find a phone in her room, so I just let it go. She wouldn't go back to bed now, so I said she could come watch TV with me. I know, I'm a terrible babysitter. We went downstairs and I went to tell the pizza man that this was the wrong house and he was gone again. So once again, I thought nothing of it, and we got Alex up from the basement to watch TV with us. Thank God for that. It honestly could have saved his life. We started to watch TV again when Alex said he heard something in the basement. I paused the TV and he was right. There was something down there. I told the kids to wait there just in case there was a wild animal, and went to open the door. What I saw still haunts me to this day. At the bottom of the stairs was the man, holding a knife, slowly making his way up the stairs, towards the door, towards me and the kids. He froze for a second when he saw me open the door, then started running. I screamed and locked the door seconds before he reached the top. He started pounding on it, screaming something I couldn't understand. I was screaming now, and Alex came running with Madison behind him to see what was happening. I grabbed them both without explaining and ran up the stairs to Haley's room. She must have heard all the commotion and heard me crying, because she didn't hesitate to open the door this time. She slammed the door and locked it, and I got out what was happening between sobs. She was crying and panicking now too, and so were Alex and Madison and Jess. We all ran into her closet and locked that too. We thought it would buy us some time. It was fucking scary though. Scariest thing that's ever happened to me. Being locked in a small, dark space, knowing you could be killed any minute. Nobody should have to go through that. That was the most terrifying half hour of my life. We were all quietly sobbing and we could hear pounding downstairs, and then it suddenly stopped. We were even more scared now, thinking he had broken the door and was on his way to kill us, but it was actually her parents coming to save us. The guy must have heard all 4 of our parents and realized he couldn't take them all on. I guess he ran off into the night because they didn't see him or even know about him till we told him what happened. I'll never know what happened for sure because they never found him. Sick fuck escaped into the night. Our parents were screaming our names when they realized what had happened downstairs. He actually had busted down the door and had ripped apart the living room and kitchen looking for us. If they had arrived any later, I might not be alive to type this right now. I only babysat a couple more times after that. I had severe paranoia that this man would come back for me. I had a nervous meltdown more than once and had to leave. The man never came back, but I was sure that me living through that night was a mistake and that this man was going to end my life. Please, anyone who's reading this, remember to teach your kids stranger danger. Drill it into their brain. Lock your windows and your doors too, because you never know what could happen. Thank you. Saved by Bikers. Written by Throwaway 121. Long-time reader and first-time poster. I don't like thinking about this incident, but it definitely belongs here. My dad worked at a beachside bar and grill when I was little. In addition to being a chef, he ran and DJ'd the bike and car shows for the restaurant. The car shows were usually on Wednesdays, and the bike nights were on Friday. A small detail, but important to the story. The car shows were on a school night, so I was rarely allowed to go. But my father would often bring me to the bike nights. By all accounts, I was an adorable and pretty mellow kid, and the bikers absolutely loved me. And yes, you might say that this was no environment for a little girl, but I learned a lot about loyalty and friendship from being around bikers. My dad told me that some of them would call into the restaurant just to ask if I would be there that week, and they'd often bring me stuffed animals and candy. My favorite of the bikers was a man that I affectionately called Uncle Teddy. He was a friend of my parents and ran absolutely mountain of a man. Around 6'8" and 400 pounds. Easily. He was an ex-Marine who loved his Harley and cigars. And every week for about 5 years he would bring me Butterfingers and a Beanie Baby. I was 6 years old the night it happened. 2003. My father had brought me to the bike show as he normally did, but I couldn't keep my eyes open about past 8 o'clock. I was just too tired. The show didn't end until 10, so my dad had gotten into the habit of putting me on an air mattress in the back of the restaurant, and he and Teddy would check on me every about 15 minutes. So I was asleep when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was a man that I'd never seen before. And he wasn't dressed in biker gear. He was wearing a short-sleeved plaid shirt and jeans and looked greasy, but not particularly scary. He smiled at me and told me that his name was Sean, that he was a friend of my dad's, and that my dad had asked him to drive me home. My parents had tried to ingrain stranger danger in me, and they told me 1,000 times to never talk to anyone I didn't know. But he knew me and my dad's name, as well as the nicknames everyone called me, so I totally bought it. I got up, grabbed the flamingo beanie Uncle Teddy had given me, and started to walk towards the parking lot. Sean didn't have a bike. He had a very old 4-door sedan. He opened the back door for me, and I climbed inside. You know how in senior citizen homes they often have plastic wrapped couches or chairs? Well, that's what the backseat of this car was like, totally covered in plastic. I think now that it was probably so there would be no trace of DNA left behind. Sean started to drive away, and to this day I can't believe how lucky I got. He had parked the car behind the restaurant in a way that it wasn't immediately visible to the bike show. But as we pulled away, I saw Teddy heading through the door, presumably to check on me. He just happened to look up at that exact moment, and probably just to acknowledge the car. I smiled at him. Uncle Teddy didn't waste a moment, didn't even stop to tell my dad what was going on. He got onto his bike and was on that car's ass before we even totally cleared the avenue that leaded out of the parking lot. The avenue that you had to take to get to the restaurant was long, about 1.5 miles, and then you had to go down another long road before you made it to the highway. Sean saw Teddy approaching in his rear view and attempted to speed up, but he must have realized it was futile. He'd been seen, and Teddy had his license plate number and a good description. Sean stopped the car, turned around, and told me very calmly to get out of the car. Now. I was scared by this point, and I didn't waste a moment climbing out and running to Teddy. Sean burnt rubber driving away, and Teddy held me for a moment before putting me on the back of his bike and talking to me softly and telling me it was all going to be alright. By the time we got back, cops had been called, and they were surrounding the place. A lot of the show had emptied out, and my dad was sobbing and screaming on the sidewalk outside of the restaurant. I'll never forget that moment. I ran up to him, hugged him as tightly as I could, and then the rest is all a blur. I talked to the cops, I talked to my dad, I even went down to the station and spoke to a sketch artist. I didn't get home until around 2 a.m. Teddy never left my side. An ABP was put out on the vehicle, which had been reported as stolen. The sketch circulated around the local news stations, but it didn't turn up anything concrete. At one point I was asked to look at a lineup, but none of them were him. Fast forward about 8 years, I was 14 and my dad decided I was old enough to know what happened. Sean had been spotted lurking around the bike show a few times before that night, and was a customer at the restaurant fairly regularly. He knew my nickname because he had been watching me for over a month. He knew my schedule and constantly how often Teddy and my dad checked on me. When his evil plan was botched and Teddy brought me back to the show, everyone had left. I had just assumed it was because the police had been investigating a crime scene, but I was wrong. They were all out looking for Sean, every single one of them. Teddy told them the make and model of the car with a description of Sean, and one of the guys thought that he sounded like a guy that frequented one of the biker bars downtown. I remember my dad paused for a long time, and I asked him what happened after that. Well, they found him, he said. The end. Thank you all for reading my story. I'm sorry if it's a bit long, but I just had to get this out of my system and out of my chest. I was home alone. Written by Agastiopia. I've been on Reddit for about 2 years now, but I just now found this subreddit. After reading a few of the top posts, I realized that what happened this summer to me is a perfect fit here. I haven't written anything in a long time, so sorry if this isn't the most articulate post. It's just that this fucked me up for a while, and I'm still not completely okay, but it's easier to cope. It was the middle of the summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house in the Kkkkkk. It's about a 2-hour drive, so it's not that big of a deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had just made me some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up to eat whenever, and I also had some money if I wanted to order some pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up till 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so my parents are gone, I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone, scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained in trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. The stairs to the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walled in, so it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this, but replacing the rail with a wall. So I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old as shit, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of those stairs, so when I get to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen, even if they were burglars or someone in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being so stupid, and just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me, in the middle of my kitchen, is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how fucking creepy this situation was, but in the moment, I just took a step forward and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping, pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen, with my heart beating out of control. I fucking sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put a chair against the doorknob like you see in TV. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and, nearly in tears, told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between the door. The fucker was standing outside of my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello?" Sir? Sir, are you there? Hello? I don't want to make a noise. Even if I wanted to, my arms were frozen. Eventually, the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes, as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door, and the sounds of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door. The 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't even leave me alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and I start racing whenever I see someone standing still. But I'm doing this alright. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever the fuck was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street, smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted, or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet again.